What are the most creative games? Here at PBS Game Show, and you probably could have guessed this, we believe that games are the most creative medium on the planet. Sorry, interpretive dance. Where else can you glide with a flower petal on a gust of wind, meditate with a ball of light, or just, I don't know, have a conversation with a really cranky fish?
As you can see, I find computers pretty fascinating.
So it's a little bit of a paradox that games find themselves retreading the same old ground. If a game becomes a hit, you can almost guarantee that you're going to see games like it from now until eternity. I mean, there's Doom with first-person shooters, or Mario with side-scrolling platformers, or Bejeweled with, little moving trinkety things around. Games sometimes have a problem with being original because they're often just calling back to other games. But my favorite games are the ones that reach out to the broader world. They show that the medium can encompass any experience at any time for anyone. So before we get ahead of ourselves, we need to ask a very basic, simple question. So just bear with me for a moment. What is creativity? Today, modern science suggests that creativity more than anything is about association. It's about taking diverse ideas and reconstructing them in unique ways. Stephen Johnson said it best: chance favors the connected mind. For her recent cover story for The Atlantic, neuroscientist Nancy Andreessen ran some creativity tests, basically glorified word games, with some really creative people, including Nobel laureates and George Lucas. So what did she find? Well, when she looked at the brains of creative people, she found that the association cortices were much stronger for them than they were for people with normal creativity. I want to celebrate the creators who are making those kinds of connections, the ones asking these big questions like, how do I turn ballet into a video game? So without further ado, let me introduce PBS Game Show's most creative games. Our first award goes to the most creative music game. So if you play a lot of music games, you find that a lot of them are pretty much the same, right? You hit a note, and if you get it wrong, then the crowd boos you, like in Rock Band. But Parappa the Rappa was totally different. Yes, you had to hit your notes, you had to hit your beats at exactly the right time, but the game also let you improvise. It didn't punish you if you wanted to throw in a kick or a punch at your own rhythm so long as you were on beat. Kick, punch. Punch. What are the other buttons? Parappa the Rappa may be the only game to really do justice to the spirit of hip-hop because it let you freestyle. Next up is our selection for most creative cinematic game. Now look, a lot of games just use the term cinematic as marketing buzzspeak, but Resident Evil actually deployed it very well. So most games, right, the camera follows your movement, but Resident Evil was revolutionary because the camera was in a fixed position, which is a standard thing for cinema. The fixed camera angle is super important. So in film, if you look at the terrifying strangulation scene in Alfred Hitchcock's style M for Murder, the director has complete control over how the scares unfold. In Resident Evil, fixing the camera, taking that ability away from players, really allowed them to maximize fright. Just like in that first sequence when you encounter the first zombie and you're backing up against the door, it's really scary. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to Cardboard Computer's Kentucky Route Zero, whose cinematography was inspired by the famous long pans of Russian director Andrei Tarkovsky. You should totally check it out, especially episode 3. Next up, most creative architectural game. It's Halo. So you're probably saying, Halo, how is that like the most architectural game? I mean, look at it. It's just a bunch of Marines in outer space shooting at the Covenant. So here's the thing. A bunch of the people who worked on the game at Bungie had backgrounds as architects, and you can actually see that in the game. So a lot of the massive structures that you see, they're inspired by this architectural movement that's known as brutalism. On the one hand, brutalism isn't really known for aesthetic beauty. I mean, I should know, I lived in a brutalist dorm my freshman year and totally hated the look of it. On the other hand, brutalism is very effective for moving people from point A to point B, which, as it turns out, is good level design, having good people flow. So I think the fact that the firefights in Halo felt so good had a lot to do with the architectural setting of the game. Speaking of visuals, let's move on to games that actively pull from the world of visual design. Some of you may not remember this, in fact, I barely remembered it myself, but Alpha Waves has the distinction of being the first 3D platforming game, a bunch of years before Super Mario 64. One of the big reasons I like it is for the look, which at that time was really modern, but at this time also really feels modern. modern. I mean, a lot of the low poly stuff that's happening right now in games, I feel like takes inspiration from a game like this. It's got these great clean lines, this great use of depth and space, and it even had this emotion mode which would let you explore the world to your heart's content, which, you know, that makes everybody happy. Another great one in terms of visual design is Echochrome, which pulled from the impossible figures of MC Escher and turned them into puzzles that were equally impossible to figure out. It's a game all about artistic perspective, which might be the reason why I was the only person on the planet who played it. Okay, this one's a little bit weird, but hear me out. Apparently gardening has a lot to offer the world of games. The award for most creative landscaping game goes to Pikmin. Nintendo's Shigeru Miyamoto, who's a very avid gardener, actually tape recorded grass in his backyard to inspire the textures for the game. I think the game speaks to this larger reality that's known to people who garden, which is that gardening has this quasi-spiritual quality to it. It's not just about tending to plants, but also creating a home and sort of protecting this environment for the creatures that live there. Or maybe I'm just reading into it too much. Jonathan Blow's The Witness would be a really close runner-up. Blow hired a landscape designer to help out with the game. So rather than just planting the trees in an aesthetically pleasing arrangement, they studied the flora and fauna and how it would evolve over time to give the island a sense of realism. Next up, the amazingly creative science games. Kerbal Space Program is so accurate that the game is actually played by NASA rocket scientists. I mean, it has you do all kinds of things that real-life aeronautical engineers would do, like landing a rover from an orbiting spacecraft. And last but not least, Minecraft, a game so creative I actually had to give it its own category. So Minecraft is amazing because it incorporates all of these different perspectives into the game itself. It's architectural because you're basically learning an AutoCAD program and you can make things like the Taj Mahal. It's scientific because you can build a working computer, which is totally nuts, a working computer. It has a sense of pastoral aesthetic beauty because you can take these long walks through this computer-generated environment. But most importantly, unlike the other games that I mentioned, which all take outside inspirations, and they do that very, very well, Minecraft itself, the act of playing Minecraft, is a creative thing. To play Minecraft is to be creative. And so I hope all the creativity that's generated in a game like Minecraft actually crosses over and becomes creativity in the real world. So there you have it. Those are my favorite creative games. What I love about all of them is not just how unique they are, but how they demonstrate that the medium of games can be in conversation with all of these different disciplines. It can talk to art and visual design and landscape design and architecture and science. I mean, designer Charles Eames said it best. Everything connects. So what do you think? Which games did I miss? What are your favorite, most creative games? And to back up your argument, tell me and everybody else in the comments what those games connect to, whether it's a person, idea, thing, type of media, whatever it might be. Hash it out in the comments, and if you like what you saw, please subscribe. I'll see you next week. Last week we talked about whether or not games are biased against the disabled. Let's see what you had to say. Webbezim points us to an amazing petition that asks all game developers to make button remapping a standard feature. We'll point it out in the description. You should check it out. Dirk Ykema suffers from a neurological condition which affects his reaction time. And Dirk points out something that's really terrible. He uses a bunch of different exploits that allow him to play games, but when game designers release new patches, oftentimes those workarounds get erased and he has to start from scratch. It brings him to tears, etc., etc. Extremely, extremely frustrating. You should read the whole comment because I think it's very easy to talk about people with disabilities in the abstract, and Dirk gives a very human face to what happens when you're not able to play games and you really, really want to. So check it out. So most of you were pretty nice in the comments, but some of you had some strongly worded criticism. PierreDolphin was one of those people, specifically outlining 2 points. The first is that multiplayer games specifically are about the highest level of competition, and if you make changes in the favor or in the name of accessibility, then that will sort of decrease the overall level of play. And the second one, in your own words, you said life is unfair, deal with it. So there are 2 things I would say to that. The first is in terms of competition. So if you were given the opportunity to play games at a very high level with someone who had a disability, let's say, I don't know, Stephen Hawking, for example, would you take that opportunity? But more specifically, if you look at the world of sports, there have been these examples where people with disabilities have been able to achieve at a high level. Jim Abbott, for example, who was one of my favorite players during my childhood, had only one arm, was an incredible pitcher, and I suspect that there are lots of folks out there who have disabilities who would be able to compete compete with the best of them if we made some very simple changes. It's not a zero-sum game. I don't think I or anybody else is saying that allowing people with disabilities will also mean that the rest of everybody else just won't be able to play or won't be able to enjoy the game the same way. Really, it's about opening it up so that there are more people who are playing games together. And the second, in terms of like life is unfair, and you're not the only person who said that, I would just ask, if you know someone with a disability, I would encourage you to look them in the face and tell them that to their face. Because I suspect that you probably wouldn't. And you're right, life isn't fair necessarily to everybody, but that doesn't mean that we don't make concessions to make life easier or better for everybody. So yeah, I would really encourage you to have this conversation with someone in your community who has a disability and see what they have to say. I bet you'll be surprised. Jeffrey Menu broke both of his thumbs and couldn't play Xbox for several months. So there you have it. I mean, we all will be there someday. We'll break an arm, we'll break a leg, our eyesight will go wherever it might be. So if we don't start thinking about how to open the net now for everybody, then when we get older, it's gonna be kind of a bummer. We won't be able to play. Or if you break your thumbs. I'm really sorry to hear about that, man. Tsu Choi or Tsu Choi, I don't know if that can be pronounced. Anyway, to you and a couple other people who pointed out that the game industry is a business, and as a business, they have to deliver the most amount of entertainment to the most number of people in a cost-effective manner. Essentially, that making these sorts of adjustments would be too expensive. It's too much of a burden. So a couple things. First of all, I don't think that we're asking that the entire game needs to be recreated just to cater to people who have a specific disability. But I do think that there are some simple things like having colorblind mode or lefty mode to allow for more people to be able to play. We're talking about millions and millions of people here, not like some small minority. The second thing is, yes, it does. It costs businesses money to make those types of adjustments. And I think it's less a question about money and more a question of ethics. I would encourage everyone to go read the text of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which laid the groundwork for things like wheelchair ramps that allow access to buildings. Yes, that costs business owners money, but that doesn't mean it's not right. So if we have to do everything because it's about money, then I don't know, that's not necessarily the world that I want to live in. Also worth noting that some of the rationale around not making changes to games to allow for people with disabilities is the same rationale that game publishers use to not deliver games for PC. They say the same thing, audience is too small, it's not active enough or whatever. So if you're a PC gamer out there, I'm sure you sort of understand where I'm coming from.